Welcome, Born Free Bikers.
Okay, good morning all you Born Free Bikers. Amarillo, Texas, we're getting ready to head out. Beautiful day. We're getting a late start though because we had a long day yesterday. So, Eric, why don't you lead us out? What are we going to do?
Let's slay some wind.
Budget fuel. Looks like it's seen better days. But how iconic is that? Imagine this service station back in its heyday. It's probably a pretty popular spot. It's right near something called the Bug Ranch where a guy buried, it looks like he buried about 3 VWs and painted them just like the Cadillac Ranch, hoping that they were going to get some visitors. But hopefully, we're going to show you a restored Phillips 66 to let you know what the station might have looked like. All right? Well, we're in McLean, Texas, and we found this nice McLean Allen Red Historical Museum. We're going to go in and take a look at it. But look at this nice little downtown, old Rexall Drugs sign. Good morning.
Good morning. How are y'all doing today?
Good. How are you?
Fine. You're not next door, are you?
No, we're not next door.
Would you like to sign in on our guest list?
Awesome. We'll do that.
If you'd like. This little museum is about this town and about the people who have passed through this town. It's really not. I mean, we're sitting right on Route 66. Was Route 66, and that street down there was Route 66. So we are a Route 66 attraction, I guess, but we really, the heritage of this is to preserve the heritage of this town. This gentleman right here on the center thing is Mr. Alfred Rowe, Sir Alfred Rowe. My grandfather was a little boy when Mr. Rowe was in and out of this town a lot. About 1900, Mr. Rowe owned almost 200,000 acres between here and Clarendon, which is southwest of us. And he and had a lot of cattle. And at the same time, my great-grandfather had a ranch north of town that we still have that was 20 sections. And so they needed a way to get their cattle to market because, you know, the trail rides like you see on the old movies is kind of hard on the cattle to get. It wears all the weight off of them, you know, by the time you get them to Kansas to market. And so that's what the men were doing at that time, was driving them to St. Louis or to Kansas or somewhere to market. So Mr. Rowe was an Englishman who had come over here. He wanted to be a cowboy. And so he had all this land, and he learned to be a cowboy. His hands said that he was a good cowboy, that he was the first one on his horse every morning and the last one off every night. Really? So that's a big part of being a good cowboy. There's a lot that goes on in between that, you know. But he appealed to the Railroad Commissioner of Texas and asked them to if they would put a switch right here. There was no town here, but the railroad went through, and so he asked them to put a switch so that they could, you know, load up some cattle and ship them out. And the Railroad Commissioner agreed to that. Railroad Commissioner's name was William Pinckney McLean. And so this is not in any history books. This is history according to Jenny. But but don't you imagine that was the thing on the table was, tell you what, if you put the switch here and the town grows up, which they knew it would, we'll call it McLean. Don't you imagine?
Awesome. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the way the Good Old Boy Network works.
Right, exactly right.
That's probably just exactly what happened. But but like I said, I don't imagine you'll see that in any history books anywhere. That happened in about 1900, and so the train did. They put a depot here. The town did grow up. Mr. Rowe had family in England, and part of the time his wife and children were over here, but they went back to England. And at one point he decided that it's better for him to live in England and visit Texas than to live in Texas and visit England, because his family was over there. So he made trips to England a couple of times every year. So he had been across the Atlantic several times. Coming back in 1912, however, he booked passage on the Titanic, and that it was a big deal. It was such a big deal in England and everywhere around, that it was so big and it was so wonderful. So he needed to check it out, and he actually didn't like it very much. He wrote a letter to his wife from on board the ship, and they docked in France and they docked in Ireland. And we think I believe that it was from Ireland that he mailed this letter to her, and he said, "My dear girl," he said, "the ship is much too big." He said, she doesn't have the power to compensate for the size. It takes forever to stop. It takes forever. Turning is difficult. So he told her they almost had a hole put in the side of the ship in dock in London, or they weren't in London, Southampton, wherever they were. And he said because they couldn't get it stopped. And he said if it hadn't been for a tugboat, a strategically placed tugboat, they would have had a hole in the side of the ship, which actually happened just a few days later. But he was on the ship. He was offered a lifeboat. It's amazing how much detail they have about what happened in that wreck from the people who survived it.
Right.
Because someone reported that he was offered a lifeboat. He was a first class passenger, and so the first class passengers were offered lifeboats first.
Yep.
And he said that they quoted him as saying he considered himself a strong swimmer, and that as long as there were women and children still on board the ship, he was not getting in a lifeboat.
Wow.
And so he didn't get in one. And I've been to the places where they have exhibits for the Titanic, and you see that they put most of those lifeboats down in the water half full or less.
Right.
And so there wasn't enough. There was not enough room for everybody. Especially doing it that way. But his body was found on an iceberg. I have to tell you that I have to backtrack and tell you a story. My granddad used to tell me this, and I thought it was just kind of a little local story. I didn't think, but now I've seen things in print about it. But he carried a black bag with him everywhere he went, a black satchel. And even on horseback, he'd loop it over his saddle horn and take it out on the roundup, And the cowboys said that a lot of times they would be out somewhere, and he'd just say, "I'll see you chaps later," and he'd go to the closest train station, and he'd be gone 2 months, 3 months, whatever. He might go to South America, he might go to England. He had a few pennies in his pocket he was to spend, so he was able to do stuff like that, but that black bag, they say, and Granddad told us that he never saw him that he didn't have that black bag in his hand. Everywhere he went. He said every school kid in town and every businessman in town, everybody in this whole area wanted to know what was in that black bag. I have a pretty good idea of what probably was in it, but the men in town said when they found his body and they found him on an iceberg, the way the men in town told it was they found his body on an iceberg and the black bag was frozen to his hand. But and I've actually seen that in print. I do not know. That can't be true, But
This bank was? Jenny, I want to thank you very much for giving us your time today.
You're very welcome.
It was awesome. It was
My
nice
pleasure.
to learn something about this. And if you guys are coming through McLean, you got to check it out.
Yeah, come on.
Well, here it is. Renovated one anyways. Okay, we're gonna go slay some wind. Born Free Bikers, good morning. It's actually daylight. I didn't get a chance to do a ending segment from our ride yesterday. We made it to our hotel, not too bad, about 7 o'clock at night. But we are in Arkansas at the Hampton Inn at Fort Smith. So for those of you who are aficionados of Route 66, you'll obviously be saying, why are you in Arkansas? Route 66 didn't even go in Arkansas. Well, that's because unfortunately, time constraints, we had to deviate from it and stay in a more truer course line east because my riding partner needs to get back home, and so we're actually going to head over to toward North Carolina, and we're going to hit Wheels Through Time. So I have to end this segment for Route 66. I hope that the small part that we brought to you, that you enjoyed, and I hope to one day return to it and do the entire thing from Chicago all the way to California. And if I do that, I'll make sure to bring you along. Thank you for being there. I hope that you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and come back for further videos, because our next one will be this one going to North Carolina, and then we'll be on the Blue Ridge Parkway and etc. It should be pretty fun. So until the next time, let's go slay some wind.